How
All
are
right.
you, pal?
Doing good, man. My name is Ed Easton Jr. from USA Today's Chiefs Wire. So, like I said, we're just happy to be able to speak with you on everything going on with the Chiefs.
Sure.
Obviously, you're going to talk a little bit about Buffalo as well. So,
Oh, well, fantastic. Excellent.
definitely. So, I'll just jump right off into it.
Okay.
Just want to ask. Obviously, you just retired last year. I think we're approaching kind of the anniversary of your retirement announcement. How has it been, retired life? And
Ooh. It's it's an interesting thing. It's kind of a catch-22, right? Because you have full autonomy of your time, but you're also not trying to keep an idle mind. And what you find yourself is pouring totally into your kids for a bit, but you get a little antsy, you get a little of this kind of itch. So just trying to fill that time. And what do you fill it with? The only thing you know, which is football. It's a saturated market full of absolute killers like yourself. The space that I'm trying to enter. So it's been extremely humbling, but incredibly satisfying. And it gives me a reason rather to kind of look forward to something throughout the day, which I think is the most important thing right now.
definitely, and I know you have your podcast, Mondays with Mitch. Just what gave you the I guess the inspiration to really jump into this field and like pursue not only just podcasting but just hosting moving forward?
I found that I had a screaming ego that I thought might have not existed until the limelight had dimmed. That being said, I also just enjoy conversation with folks. I enjoy digesting information, especially football. It's been incredibly satisfying and something that we're going to grow into. We're going to go through a name change here in a week or two. We haven't told anyone exactly what it is yet, but a show we can grow into, trying to increase our range, broaden our spectrums, our horizons. But it's one of those things that I kind of had a fever dream around Christmas. If this was something that I really wanted to do, and you dip your toe in it, and there was this kind of, I don't know. I wondered if it was for me, and then I found if I was going to do this, you dive fully into the deep end, give it a few years with all of your energy, everything you can muster up, and then if it doesn't work out, at least I can sit down, take a nap, and rest easy because it wasn't for me. But as of now, I'm lit up by it, dude. It really is. It's fantastic.
Definitely, and I think it's such a great thing when athletes, whether it's like current players or former players, are able to just be in this space because the conversations you guys have amongst each other as former teammates or coaches is different from something maybe I would ask, because you guys have an experience that we just will never understand. So, like, I respect it and I always appreciate when I see that content come through.
Yeah, well, I mean, so the thing is, you have to kind of dial down the locker room while still being able to divulge information. I think that was the thing that we found early on was like we can make it disgusting because that's what most locker rooms are. But I have kids, I have a wife, and I have a career in this business, hopefully in the foreseeable future, and I don't want that derailed by just having a good time with the buddies. That being said, candidness and authenticity reign supreme. And so you have to marry both and find ways to walk that fine line. And it's something that's learned, but when you walk it, it's a beautiful thing because you can see your guests are enjoying it. They're letting their guard down, still showing their personality while not ruining careers. So that's been a really fun part of this.
Definitely hear that, and I want to take you back a little bit. Go back to where it all started. Just because obviously we're in this time period now, the scouting combine's going on. What do you remember back to when you were going through the combine? Obviously, just fresh out of Missouri, and the Chiefs have that first meeting with you. What do you remember from that time?
I remember getting my hair cut at a barber shop and them telling me that I was bald as shit and that I shouldn't be, that I should let it go. And I was like, oh, listen, I'm 22 years old. Give me, but I got lined up and up here and it was terrible. But what I remember about the scouting combine was, of course, there was some angst and the anticipation towards it. You didn't know what you were walking into, and you had heard these horror stories from players in the past. But once you stepped into that realm, there was almost this sense of bliss and this sense of relief because you realize that no matter who was the most highly touted, who had the laurels, everyone was on the same plane. Everyone was going to be tested, not only physically but mentally to see how you were. Because I'm sure you've heard that they sleep deprive you, and they, the interview questions they've gotten better now because they were downright illegal, some of them around when I was at the time. But they tested, and there was a real sense of relief in that because your own merit was what was going to carry you over. And I remember Coach Reed and Kansas City asked me to come in there and chat, and we didn't talk about football at all. Maybe a little bit here and there, but we just talked about life. We talked about how you viewed the game, how you envision being a professional, the ins and outs of that. I remember he had just gotten his knee done, I believe, so he was walking around a little gingerly, and we talked about just kind of just accruing war wounds and how that our bodies were depreciating assets. It was very personable rather conversation that I really enjoyed, and I found it fascinating, right? Because even at that time, going in 2015, right, like it was Coach Reed. He had this huge stint in Philadelphia for 13 years, and he had gone to Kansas City, revamped this organization that was right down the road from me. You heard a lot about it in Missouri, and it was fascinating week. I had such a good time.
You're drafted by Kansas City, like you just said. You were just playing in Missouri. Was that like just the ideal situation for you, just because of, like I said, where you were playing in college and everything that was going on?
I mean, yes, absolutely. My wife lived in Omaha, Nebraska, so to get there, you had to, of course, go through Kansas City, and you had to pass I-70, I believe, and then there it is, the castle that is Arrowhead Stadium, right? It was of course, proximity wise, the closest NFL stadium, but at the same time, also, I mean, there was the weight of being a Kansas City Chief, even at that time, which was fantastic. And my dad was born in Kansas City and had these ties to Kansas City, and it was their team growing up. And he went to Municipal Stadium, and it was just all these really extraordinary coincidences. And then I sold all my college stuff because I assumed I was going to be going across country, and it was just a drive away. It was disgusting college stuff that needed to be sold, but yeah, I mean, in my relationship with my wife, girlfriend at the time, she was still in Columbia, so it was just, you talk about the Lord working in very strange, mysterious ways. It was ever present in 2015 with the 49th pick to the Kansas City Chiefs.
That's definitely a really cool situation to be in. Just take you back to your time in Kansas City. Obviously, you mentioned a lot about Andy Reid going through the process in the combine. How was he as a head coach, and then also working with Andy Heck on the offensive line?
Yeah, I remember walking into that building and feeling, um, it's interesting because Coach Reid is very personable, but he also has this presence about him, this aura that is incredibly intimidating for a young football player. You understood when you got in there, it was you were in a professional setting. I remember he didn't say much to me for a while. The first time I really had a conversation with Coach Reed was I'd gotten an opportunity to go with the ones. This is during phase 3. We would do these days where you'd kind of do for a section of it, you'd work on your first few opponents and maybe the end division opponents, but it was really an opportunity for ones versus ones. It was also the first test to doing his, the mystic long drive drill, right? That you had heard. So it was my first opportunity doing long drive drill. He had told me that day that I was going to be at the ones. And those long drive drills is ones versus ones for 18 straight plays. And I'm getting absolutely cooked play after play after play. And I remember it was probably like play 6 of 18. Dontari Poe hits me with the most incredible inside move. Alex Smith barely got the ball. He's being touched, right? And I remember Coach Reed kind of, he has that little bit of a disappointed scowl with the mustache, and he looks at me and he goes, 61, quit blowing your chance. And of course, my heart felt like it was going to go to my scrotum, right? And that happens. And I remember I'm like, I still have 12 plays. I'm going to have to call my mom after this, all that stuff. But it was also kind of what he does the best. And in Kansas City is that you're going to, as a young player, you're pliable, you not only physically but mentally. So you're going to get your trial by fire, and you're going to sink or you're going to swim. And they do a beautiful job of making sure that you swim. It's just going to be a little uncomfortable for you. And there was growing pains by both parties being surrounded by a young Mitch Morse. But it was great. And then with Andy Heck, he was an incredible teacher. He is an incredible teacher, maybe one of the great teachers in this business. And he had his hands full coming from a guy who played in a spread offense, playing tackle and going, your first 9-on-7 short yards goal line, and I'm seeing guys I didn't even know existed. And he would get so frustrated, but he was so kind that we would be in meetings and we would take a break, and then we'd come back, and I would just be messing up what was on the screen, and he'd have to take another 5-minute break. And his patience, but at the same time, his ability to instill a sense of urgency, understanding, giving me an opportunity to understand the gravity of the situation I was in, which was that you have the keys to the castle, you're the center, like what all that entails. And you have a quarterback who's in year 13. And we had just come off a season in 2014. It was maybe the last time the Chiefs weren't in the playoffs, right? So stakes were very high and it was stressful, but man, it was conducive for growing as a football player. And Andy Heck was a great teacher of not only the technique, but the game of football. And he fostered with all of his young players an opportunity to grow.
Um, I just want to kind of like keep on that line because you were talking about Alex Smith and working with him to begin your career. Um, what was that like? Because I know it, and the reason I bring that up because it was like you had that transition time from Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes. What do you remember just like working with Alex and then having that transition to Patrick Mahomes?
Working with Alex was like a preparatory school for learning how to be a professional football player. When I say that, I mean it was a master class. You had a guy who had in his first 7 years 7 different offensive coordinators. He had learned how to not only grow as a football player but transition through adversity, right? And he had had this time where he had been playing unbelievable football, and the proverbial rug was pulled from him. And then he comes to Kansas City, has a renaissance, a resurgence in his career, and he knows exactly what he wants. And every single minute of every single day has a dictated time and purpose. So you're seeing a guy who does not waste any time in the facility. And he was also incredibly patient with me, which I thought he didn't have to be because, he's a guy who's accrued so many, under center snaps. And I'm a tackle from Missouri trying to learn how to snap the ball and learn how to process information. And not only is he having to do his job, he's for the first few months having helped me do my job. And of all the quarterbacks I've played with, of course, backups, but Josh, Pat, Trevor, Alex is the most competitive sucker I've ever been in a huddle with. The man oozed not only moxie, but he oozed competitive fire, and it was palpable. It was contagious. And to see that play in and play out was extraordinary. And then when Pat comes in 2017, Alex was much older than me, but he still had a sense of like he had this protective feeling about a guy. Like what are you seeing that we don't see? This is our quarterback and such. And he handled it with grace, and he was the ultimate mentor to Pat. And I think Pat did a great job of just kind of silently soaking stuff up and then working on his craft. And then, dude, we were all along for the ride in 2018. We had no idea what we were stepping into. I've never seen a man's life change more from week 1 to week 17 than Patrick Mahomes. And I've never seen a man not change from week 1 to week 17 when everything else around him was begging him to change, to begging him to be a different person. And he wasn't. He was an incredible teammate, extremely approachable. And now it's what we're seeing. It just continued year after year. It's the way he prepares. It's the way, yes, he's got all this stuff outside of football, but the most important thing in his life, of course, is faith and family. But it's football. It's being a professional. It's going through those grimy days. And it's what makes him so special. And no moment's too big. He steps into the huddle, and the thing that you see about these extraordinary quarterbacks, so no matter if you're up by 20 or down by 20, no matter what the state of the game is, they walk in with this utter confidence. And it's not this rah-rah bullshit. It's this stuff where you can feel it in your eyes. You see it in their eyes. And maybe when they're saying the play call, they're saying it to every single person. It's just this untangible thing, and he's got it, and he's had it since day one.
It's definitely interesting. And then, like I said, I'm just happy to talk to you because no one really, I think, can really describe that moment better than you because you have to work so closely with these guys and just like understanding like what Alex was going through, and then obviously the transition with Mahomes and the differences. So, that's just something that a lot of people don't see that you see. So I really love that. Just going into like your last days with the Chiefs, and obviously that infamous AFC Championship game against the Patriots. Sorry, to bring it up,
Okay.
but it's did you know that would possibly be your last game? 'Cause I know free agency is about to start, and
Yeah,
the big deal comes with Buffalo. But did you know that was going to be your last one with Kansas City?
I had more than an inkling that the writing was on the wall. Listen, candid conversations are sometimes hard to come by in this business, but on the rare occasions that I think they're becoming more prevalent, and it's just a good way to do business. They're uncomfortable, but I going into 2017, the year prior, there was a change of guard at GM. Right, Brett Veach steps in, um, and as the GM, and before training camp, he says, "Hey, let's just get through this year, and we'll get your deal done." And of course, it took me aback, but it was also a great vote of confidence. And then week two, I blow my foot out to oblivion, try to come back, and it just, it's not working. So I end up playing like 5 games that year and have to have pretty major foot surgery. And then, free agency happens. They're spending money. They're not going to spend money on a guy who they don't know if it's going to be the same player coming back. It's an offensive lineman where it's required to anchor. And this foot injury, it's pretty profound. So they go about like, hey, we'll revisit this in training camp and we find out if you still have the juice. I'm like, all right, that makes sense. And then training camp comes around. It's working out great. Foot's feeling good. And then they go, listen, we've spent a little too much, we've spent in free agency. We don't have any more capital for you. And honestly, at that moment, I had just missed, my first year. I had 2 concussions, and then I get another one in 2018. So at the end of that year, I had 3 concussions. I had missed all these games with those concussions, and with that foot, I think I'd played 1 season worth in last 2 seasons. When I was on the field, it felt very good. I felt like I was playing good football. But it was probably time for a change of scenery for both parties. And, there was no offer on the table. That was okay. They kind of told me they were going to let me walk. And what that did, honestly, counterintuitively, it freed me up. I had this huge sense of freedom that I've only had a few times in my career because I knew where I stood with the team. It wasn't because they didn't like me. They just didn't think they could afford me. At least that's what they told me. I don't want to know the other way around. Candidness goes in a way where sometimes not telling you the truth is also helpful for feelings sakes. But yeah, I listened. There was no ill will, but I kind of knew where I stood come that AFC Championship game.
Yeah, and I understand. And obviously, the you get the big deal at the time with the Bills. It was you were the highest paid center in the NFL, so it was like definitely a good situation with that.
I think it worked out for both parties because then they end up with Creed, and Creed's an absolute horse.
Definitely, yeah, and just like going to your time transitioning to Buffalo. The Bills are on the rise. They have a young quarterback by the name of Josh Allen. What was it like just going with him and like I guess getting to work with Josh and seeing his development?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of like Pat's first year. You just kind of strap in and you're along for a ride, right? I feel like as a center, you get a lot more credit than you deserve in regards to developing players. No matter who is going to be his center, he was going to be just fine, figured this thing out. I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to kind of be along that ride for 5 years, right? Josh, in the same vein as Pat, has that look in his eye when he walks into the huddle where you just understand that he's exuding confidence no matter what the stakes. The stakes are at their highest. These guys enter the calmest, which is freaky and something that my cortisol level would be shooting out of my eye sockets, right? It was such a blessing, dude. I think my football career, if you just had to preface it as me being around a lot better players than myself and me just kind of riding their coattails until it's time for me to retire. And Josh was no exception. Besides that, he's a good friend. He's a good person. He's a guy that in the locker room is taking the time to foster relationships no matter who you are. There's not a lot going on in Buffalo. It's not a knock. It's just the truth. So he built this absolute castle out there where he'd have folks over. That was the place where you could go be yourself. You can invest in fellowship. You can let your guard down. And that's a lot for a player to do. And he did that. And I mean, you see it. He's MVP, fantastic football player, one of my best buddies.
I do have to. I gotta disagree with you on one thing. I would consider you a great player. You were a Pro Bowler during your time in Buffalo. So
So, yeah, well, about year 8, they felt bad for the kid and gave me a Make a Wish Pro Bowl, which I appreciate. Yes, more for my wife and kids. Yeah, and as you can tell by some of the folks that made the Pro Bowl recently, it's starting to lose its credibility a bit.
Well, yeah, there's some signs with that, but like I said, we're counting it. What I do want to think about, because like I said, you make the change to Buffalo, and then now we have this new great rivalry in the AFC, Buffalo versus Kansas City. What was just the mood, I guess, in the Buffalo locker room? Was it just like everything we're doing is to beat this team because they are our top rival? Like, was it that type of thing where the Chiefs were on you got was on your guys' minds during this time period?
Um, well, absolutely. I mean, you bang out what, 5 appearances, 3 Super Bowl wins. They send you home. I think 3 of the 5 years that I was there, right? Like, yeah, they're definitely on your mind. They're not the sole reason why you try to better yourself as a competitor, right? You understand what it takes to get to that moment, but yeah, absolutely. And it was kind of an interesting situation, that being my prior team, saying your friends, so still some of my very good friends, and it's not a. It was never no. It was there was never malice, but there was definitely. I'm like, damn, I want to beat these fucking dudes once in the playoffs. I mean, because we'd win every so often in the regular season, but these dudes kept sending us home, and they were always extraordinary games that, of course, changed. I mean, you just talk about like the 2021, the 13 second, when you have these games where it's just some other monocle or whatever that describes it. That's how you know it's these games are extraordinary. Yeah, I mean, of course they earned that right to be on everyone's mind, and I assume they might be back on people's minds here sooner rather than later.
I could definitely see that, and I do want to just kind of wrap up from with your career. You ended your career in Jacksonville.
Yep.
Um, when, like I said, kind of bring it full circle. When did you really know like maybe this was it in terms of ending your playing career? Like, was there a moment that you remember that you don't mind sharing that said, you know what, this is it. I had a great career, and I'm not going to list any calls or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So I go here. Buffalo releases me another candid conversation that I appreciate. They kind of give me a heads up a few months prior. I had every intention to retire as a Buffalo Bill that 10th year and then kind of ride off in the sunset. But rarely do you get that opportunity in the NFL to dictate the way you want it to end. That being said, Doug Peterson, who was my first offensive coordinator with the Kansas City Chiefs, was the head honcho down here. And I'd always kind of seen him do his thing. And we had a few coaches from Buffalo. We had Heath Farwell, who's a special teams coach here. He was in Buffalo my first 3 years. And then Chad Hall, the receivers coach, now the receivers coach of the New York Giants, extremely good buddy of mine, also brother-in-law of Matthew Stafford, which is kind of fun, is down here, and they're just having a party. They're in Florida and they're all this stuff. And my wife had always joked that if we had decided to give it one more go at the end of my career to make it below a certain latitude, because she'd been freezing her ass off in Kansas City and in Buffalo. And then the opportunity presented itself, and of course she was quiet about the whole thing. And the two heavy suitors were Jacksonville, but the one that was actually calling the most and pressing the most was the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they were 3 hours south of Buffalo. And I love Pittsburgh. And I show up and I tell my wife, I'm like, listen, I hope I don't like this place, so we can just kind of walk away. And I call her when I'm there, and I'm just like, I got terrible news. This place is football heaven. It's Pittsburgh. It's Pittsburgh Steelers. While I'm there, Jacksonville calls. I come down here. They offer me a little bit less money, but the familiarity and, of course, the palm trees. And I think it was time in my career to have my family thrive. And we did that. And I would say I signed a 2 year deal. And halfway through that first year, we're playing in New England, or not, we're playing in London. We're playing the Chicago Bears at Tottenham, and we're getting killed. I'm playing dog shit football. And I remember the next day we're watching a film in like a conference room at the Grove, which is this beautiful hotel. And coach puts me up on the screen. I just ran the wrong way on a play. Stupid play. I should be up there. And then Harry Potter Land, where they film Harry Potter's and a mile away. So we had these tickets to go check it out. I'm sitting at Harry Potter Land, surrounded by magic, and I'm like, I don't want to do this shit anymore. I don't want to be a wizard, but I don't want to do this shit anymore. You know what I mean? It sucks. I don't enjoy the process. I don't enjoy what's happening. I'm playing for vanity's sake. I just seen a bunch of my friends, lives change with their legs exploding and stuff like this. And so I call my wife and we have a good conversation for 3 hours. And of course, this is like week 7 or 8. So how do you still be a professional, do your job, knowing that this is the end, but not letting that dictate or affect how you play, because that affects everyone else. And that's not fair to them. It's not fair to myself. There should be clarity and grace and knowing. And it was difficult every single week. And then you see if maybe we win a few games, if I feel like I want to play a little more, and nothing changed. So we go and there's a huge regime change. They changed the whole front office in Jacksonville. I get to meet these guys. And then Tony Baselli, the team president, approaches me and goes, "Hey, have you thought about retiring? You're going into year 11. We're going through a culture change." And he didn't know that I would already, like, yeah, I didn't care what was going to happen. I'll pay money back. I don't. So I'm like, yeah, I had, what? I have thought about it a little bit. Let me kind of sit back on it. And we had both, they went to the combine. I went to Disney with my family. We come back and I was like, you know what? I think it's time to retire. They print out the paper. I sign it. And, they had clawback. I think I had to pay $3 million back technically if I wanted to, or if they wanted me to, but they didn't claw it back. They said, "Thank you for your service. We appreciate it." And you know what? They did not have to do that. This is a business. And I will forever be grateful. I'll ever hold a soft spot in my heart for Tony Baselli and the Khan family for letting me walk away with some grace. I had signed a 2-year deal. I had 2-year obligation. I only fulfilled 1 year of that deal. They had every right to claw back money for fiscal ramifications, and they didn't. And that was it was a pretty powerful thing.
It's a class act move by Jacksonville.
It was unbelievable.
I do got two more questions for you, and it's going to be obviously based on what's going on with the current state of the Chiefs. Like you mentioned, you felt like they're going to be right back in there this year. Speaking of somebody that we may not sure if he's going to be right back in there, what are your thoughts on Travis Kelce? Do you feel like, I know that's like everyone talks about it, but we got to get the opinions on it. What are your thoughts? Do you feel like he is wrapping it up, or is he just going to come back for another season?
I don't know if Travis Kelce quite knows right now. I think this is one of those things that every year, especially when you get closer to the end, this will be year 14 for him, I believe. This is not a decision he takes lightly, especially with what he has going on off the field, right? I can tell you one thing: Travis Kelce adores football. He adores the grind. It was so impressive this past OTAs being there for a day or two and seeing the work he was still putting in, seeing the attention to detail, seeing the standard he was holding his friends to, lifting people up in year 13. I think he has a tough decision to make. Do I think he should come back? Yes, selfishly, I do. I'm a fan of the game. I'm a fan of my friend playing football. It's a different energy when he enters Arrowhead and drive. It's a beautiful thing. It's poetry in motion. Um, I assume they want him back. I'm sure there's a number there, but at the same time, you cannot refute the fact that these past 2 years have left terrible tastes in this team's mouth. Of course, that Super Bowl loss, and then last year, it's the first time since 2014 they haven't made the playoffs. I think there's a sense of embarrassment. I think there's a sense of getting back to the grind, right? I don't think it's going to be a very comfortable offseason for the players. And I don't think they very much care. I think they're willing to take that leap and get back to a place where they're winning, they're champions, because they know they have the guys, they know how they have the stuff. So I I don't know if Travis knows. And I think when the time comes, he's going to he's going to have that clarity, and whatever decision he makes, he's going to go full bore into.
I definitely hear that. And I got one more for you. And, I got to go back to the offensive line. You mentioned Creed Humphrey and, how great his career started. I think he's been a Pro Bowler every year since he's been in the league. What is something that, because obviously us as people that are watching, covering the game or fans, what is it that we don't see from the center position that Creed Humphrey is doing so well?
I feel like it would be easier to say what he doesn't do well, and because the list of what he does well is profound. Of course, he is He's brilliant when it comes to the big picture of understanding defense. He's extraordinary at hand placement, leverage, striking ability, working with him, working well with his guards, working well one on one. I think the thing that people sleep on still is his ability to move in space, and not only move in space, but making contact on the move when maybe your base isn't set, and still finding positions of power with hand placement or leverage or whatever, and having this drive, this physicality. And it's extraordinary to watch. I find myself, because when you first get guys in the league that have a little bit of hype, it's the curmudgeon in you to be like, oh, we'll see. And it took about 2 games, and it's been a it's been a snowball effect ever since. The guy is not only that. The thing that people don't talk about enough is how consistent he's been in his availability. The man hasn't, I don't think he's missed a practice in the NFL. Extraordinary. He should be celebrated. And I know he's celebrated, but I don't even think enough for what he's been able to do for that offense, for Pat, what he's meant to that team. He's just a mauler and a worker and a blue collar guy, everything you want in a center.
Yeah, it's definitely amazing. Mitch, thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to watching more episodes of the podcast. I know you say you might be changing the name, so, but definitely looking forward to catching some more.
I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you so much for having me on. This is a treat.